The subway doors hissed open, spilling a fresh wave of tired souls into the dimly lit car. The air was thick with the metallic scent of steel and the faint traces of damp winter coats. The train rocked forward, rattling through the tunnels beneath New York City like a mechanical beast. Keanu Reeves sat in the farthest corner, unnoticed. He wasn't dressed like a celebrity. A dark hoodie, a well-worn leather jacket, jeans that had seen their share of days. His head tilted slightly downward, fingers idly tapping against his knee in rhythm with the jazz flowing through his headphones. To the world, he was just another passenger. Another shadow among the hundreds riding the subway that night. But he was watching, and he saw everything. The old woman stepped onto the train just before the doors slid shut. Small, fragile, wrapped in a cashmere shawl that had long lost its warmth. She moved carefully, gripping the metal pole with thin, wrinkled fingers. Her presence barely registered among the sea of passengers, except to one pair of eyes. A young man in a hoodie, barely more than a shadow himself, had been watching her, predator and prey. His fingers twitched inside his pockets, his eyes darting left and right, searching for witnesses. He took a step closer. Keanu noticed the way his body leaned forward slightly, like a runner at the starting line. He saw the way the young man's fingers flexed, preparing, a moment before the storm. Then, it happened. The young man lunged. The woman barely had time to react before her purse was ripped from her hands. She gasped, a sharp, brittle sound swallowed by the screech of the train's brakes. Her frail body staggered back, colliding against the subway pole. Gasps rippled through the car, but no one moved. The thief pivoted sharply, his sneakers skidding against the floor as he bolted toward the exit. He never made it. Keanu was already on his feet. Keanu moved faster than anyone had time to process. 2 steps, 3. Then he was there, blocking the exit. The thief skidded to a stop. He looked up, confusion flashing across his face. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. He knew that face. For a second, the entire train car seemed to hold its breath. No one spoke. No one dared to move. The only sound was the hum of the subway, the flickering overhead lights casting shadows on the walls. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Put it down. The words were calm, measured. No anger. No threat. Just certainty. The thief swallowed. His fingers clenched around the stolen purse. His eyes darted around the train car, looking for a way out, for an escape. There was none. Passengers were watching now, their eyes wide. A man in a suit had half risen from his seat, his mouth slightly open in shock. A teenager had pulled out her phone, her hand trembling. But it was Keanu who held the room. A quiet storm in the eye of chaos. The thief's breathing turned ragged. He wasn't facing some random commuter. He wasn't even facing an angry New Yorker ready to throw a punch. He was facing John Wick himself. The moment stretched, tension coiling tighter and tighter. And then, the purse dropped. It hit the subway floor with a hollow, final thud. The thief hesitated for half a second before turning on his heel and vanishing into the next car. Keanu didn't chase him. He didn't have to. The battle was already over. He bent down, picked up the purse, and turned back toward the elderly woman. She was still gripping the metal pole, her knuckles white. Gently, he placed the purse in her hands. "Are you okay?" His voice was soft now, the storm dissipating into calm waters. The woman nodded, her lips trembling, but no words came. She clutched the purse to her chest, as if it were a lifeline. And then, in a voice so quiet it barely reached above the sound of the subway, she whispered, "Thank you." Keanu nodded. No grand speeches, no heroic proclamations, just a quiet return to his seat. The train rumbled forward, the moment slipping into the past like another forgotten night in New York City. No one took pictures. No one screamed. But every single person in that subway car knew they had just witnessed something unforgettable. For a few moments, the subway car remained frozen in time. The rhythmic clatter of the train against the tracks faded into the background. The world outside, blurry tunnels, flickering advertisements, the distant echoes of another train rushing in the opposite direction. became irrelevant. All eyes were on him. Keanu Reeves sat back down, adjusting the hood of his jacket as if nothing had happened. But something had. Something had shifted in the air. The elderly woman still clutched her purse like it was a piece of her soul. Her fingers trembled, and Keanu could see the fear still lingering in her eyes. She was breathing in short, shallow gasps, trying to convince herself that it was over. But it wasn't over. Not yet. A man in a business suit, who had been too stunned to move earlier, finally found his voice. "Holy shit," he exhaled, staring at Keanu as if he had just materialized out of a movie screen. That was a teenage girl, still gripping her phone, cut in, eyes wide. "Oh my God. You're actually Keanu Reeves." A murmur spread through the subway car. Recognition dawned on people's faces, replacing the shock of the event. But Keanu didn't react. He wasn't looking for attention. He wasn't here to be a celebrity. He was watching her. The old woman. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. She glanced up at him, eyes glassy. She wasn't just shaken. She was reliving something. Keanu had seen this look before. He had seen it in war veterans, in people who had lost everything, in survivors. PTSD. This wasn't just about her purse. It was about something deeper. Keanu leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, you sure you're okay?" Her gaze flickered up to meet his, and for the first time, she really saw him. Not a stranger, not a celebrity, just another human being. She took a deep breath, and then she spoke. "My husband," she started, voice barely above a whisper. "My husband always told me to be careful." Keanu listened. "I lost him 2 years ago," she continued, her fingers gripping the purse tighter. "Cancer. After 54 years together." Keanu felt a pang in his chest. "He always held my hand when we rode the subway," she went on, a small, sad smile appearing on her face. "I don't think I've taken it alone since he passed." The weight of her words settled over the train car. Keanu's jaw tightened. He understood loss. He understood what it meant to carry someone in your heart long after they were gone. "I'm sorry," he said softly, and he meant it. She nodded, exhaling shakily. "Tonight was the first time I got on alone." And then, her voice cracked, and she gestured weakly toward where the thief had run off. Keanu's hands, this wasn't just about a stolen purse. It was about stolen security, stolen dignity, stolen peace. A woman in the next seat reached out and gently placed a hand over the elderly woman's. "You're safe now," she whispered. He made sure of that. The old woman blinked rapidly, as if fighting back tears. Then she turned back to Keanu. "Thank you," she said again, this time stronger, this time with meaning. Keanu nodded once, but inside, something burned. The subway doors started to close. Keanu moved. 1 second he was standing still, the next, he was across the car, slipping through the closing doors just in time. Gasps erupted from behind him. Someone yelled, "Oh my God, he's actually doing it." Keanu took off. The thief bolted up the stairs, 2 steps at a time. Keanu was right behind him. His boots hit the concrete, his breath steady. This wasn't a movie. No dramatic music. No choreographed fight scene. This was real. But Keanu had trained for this. Years of stunt work, fight choreography, muscle memory kicking in. His feet barely made a sound as he closed the distance. The thief shoved past a group of people. A woman shrieked. A man cursed. Keanu dodged them effortlessly. Then, the thief made a mistake. He turned down an alleyway. Dead end. Game over. Keanu slowed his steps as he entered the alley. The thief was pacing, chest heaving, hands shaking. For the first time, Keanu saw him for what he really was. Just a scared kid. Maybe 19. Maybe younger. The thief's hands curled into fists. "What do you want, man?" Keanu exhaled. This wasn't about punishment. It was about something more. "I want to know why," Keanu said. His voice was low, calm. "Why'd you do it?" The kid hesitated. He looked at the ground. Then, after a long silence, he muttered, "I had to." Keanu studied him. Had to. The thief's jaw clenched. I got a little sister. She's hungry. Silence. Keanu felt that. Deep. He knew what it meant to struggle. To feel like the world had left you behind. Stealing from an old woman isn't the answer, Keanu said, voice firm. There are other ways. The kid swallowed hard. Something inside him was breaking. Keanu reached into his pocket, pulled out a couple $100 in cash. The kid's eyes widened. What? Keanu stepped forward, holding it out. Go home, he said. Buy food. Take care of your sister. The thief stared at the money. Then, slowly, he took it, and for the first time that night, his shoulders relaxed. Thanks, he whispered. Keanu nodded. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Back on the subway platform, people were still talking. The old woman sat, calmer now, wrapped in a coat someone had offered her. When Keanu re-entered the station, the murmurs grew. But he didn't stop. He just nodded to the old woman one last time, stepped onto the next train, and disappeared into the night. The story would spread. The moment would be remembered. But for Keanu, it was just another night in New York. The train doors closed behind Keanu Reeves, sealing the moment inside the memory of those who had witnessed it. The subway rumbled forward, pulling away from the station and vanishing into the underground labyrinth of New York. But the echoes of what had just happened lingered. The old woman sat there, staring at the now quiet subway car. She was still holding onto her purse, but her grip had loosened. The trembling in her fingers had stopped. She looked at the people around her. Strangers just minutes ago, now bound together by something greater. They had all seen something rare, something real. Not just a heroic act, but a reminder. A reminder that in a world of indifference, kindness still existed. That in a city where people walked past each other without a second glance, someone had cared. And that someone had been Keanu Reeves. The businessman in the suit exhaled sharply, rubbing his hands together as if trying to process what he had just seen. The teenage girl, still gripping her phone, whispered, I should have filmed that. The man sitting across from her shook his head. No, that wasn't for the internet. And he was right. This wasn't some viral moment meant to be exploited for likes and shares. This was personal. A moment meant to be held in the hearts of those who saw it. The subway screeched to another stop. The doors slid open, and the old woman slowly stood up. She hesitated for a moment. Then, turning to the people around her, she spoke. You know, she said, her voice quiet but steady. I think I needed this. A woman beside her nodded. We all did. And just like that, the moment moved forward, carried away by the steady rhythm of the subway, traveling through tunnels, through lives, through perspectives. But it didn't die. It lived on in whispered conversations that night. It lived on in the people who went home and told their families, you won't believe what happened today. It lived on in the thief, who held onto the bills Keanu had given him, staring at them with a lump in his throat. It lived on in Keanu himself. Because that night wasn't just another night. It was proof. Proof that sometimes the smallest actions, the ones not done for cameras or applause, are the ones that matter most. Somewhere in the city, Keanu stepped off the train. He walked up the stairs into the cold night, the sounds of New York wrapping around him once again. No one recognized him. No one stopped him. And that was exactly how he wanted it. The world didn't need to know what had happened tonight. But maybe, just maybe, it needed to remember what it meant. Because the truth is, we all have choices. We can look away. We can stay silent. We can pretend we don't see the things happening right in front of us. Or we can act. We can be the reason someone believes in good again. Keanu didn't save the world that night. But to one old woman, to one frightened kid, to every soul on that subway car, he reminded them that heroes don't just exist in movies. They exist in real life. And maybe, just maybe, we can be one too.